Hey everyone, this is Kaz here of Kaz-Magic Arts. Thank you for tuning into my very first podcast. I'm very excited about this. I really didn't know exactly what platform I wanted to use to be able to actually do it. So YouTube was actually the best choice that I could actually come up with right now until I absolutely get a really good feel of podcasting. I may actually find a platform to use to be able to do it live. But at the moment, this is the best choice. So right now, I'm using my OBS to absolutely just record everything of what I'm going to talk about subject wise. So that way, it can just be much easier for me to just upload it to the channel. So this is Creative Underground. I thought about this name for, I'd say, probably a half of a year now, and it was an idea that I thought about for just basically just getting information out there to those of you that want to know about the arts or about conventions and a few other things. Now, a couple of years ago, I was asked about possibly doing a podcast for a radio station. Although I didn't get a chance to really do that, but I thought maybe I'd give it a swing now that I've actually been hearing much more about podcasts and seeing how useful they really are. All right, so uh, like I said, thank you for coming to Creative Underground. I'm really looking forward to seeing how well this goes, and I hope you guys enjoy what I'm about to talk about. All right, so for those of you that knew about me, I was doing live streaming on Facebook, and I was sharing to multiple groups. And sitting there trying to draw and absolutely talk about subjects had been a little bit uh, had been a little bit tricky because I was trying to focus on drawing and also talk about particular subjects. I was also writing down notes about what you could possibly do. Well, no, sorry. I was actually writing down notes to talk about uh, subjects, and there were times where I was not able to actually keep up with what I was going to talk about because I didn't have the notes. So um, really it was pretty it was pretty taskful to try to sit there and think about what subjects I was going to talk about while I was absolutely trying to draw. So fear not, I am still going to post up videos of me drawing and possibly probably talking over them, but I definitely want to try to give this a try. But anyway, so the subject that I want to talk about is absolutely breaking into the art industry. I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's pretty tough, especially nowadays. Now that you have social media and you have people out there that are very competitive, and then you are trying to catch up with those that have been out there for 20 plus years creating art and being able to absolutely get their names much more known. So, just to give you guys some information about what you could actually do. Uh, I'm definitely gonna do the best I can to tell you about it. So, if you want to break into the art industry, number one thing you definitely want to do is learn the basics. What I mean by that is that you want to learn like shapes, proportion, perspective. Uh, so what I mean by shapes is that this is going back to when you're taking geometry in high school, or if you're getting ready to take geometry in general, which is dealing with math. So shapes are dealing with like triangle, circle, uh, rectangle, square. It's just the basics, and that's something that I've been trying to incorporate with people when I first started doing YouTube. When I did my very first YouTube videos, that was the very first thing that I absolutely taught to people was to go with the basics, and that is shapes. When you really do the shapes for your art, it gives you a much better idea of how to absolutely, draw in like one good line, or maybe just getting a good handle on your drawing techniques. And that's why we have shapes. But also shapes is to just basically learn more like proportions. And that's another critical thing that you definitely want to make sure that you keep in mind as well, is that proportions does play a part when you're absolutely trying to do shapes. Now, proportions, you can go many kind of ways with it, but the only thing about proportions is that you want to be as consistent as possible. Now, you do have some artwork out there of where there are big heads, for a small body, or you have this really beefy looking guy for comics. But the thing is that those are proportions, but they're also shapes. And when you look at those much more closely, you start to get an understanding that they're not only being in proportion, but they have those shapes in there. They have those shapes of what they use from their basics. So when you're drawing the face, it starts off in like one circle. When you're doing your elbows for the pre-sketch of a drawing, or when you're doing kneecaps for your pre-drawing, or so I say, when you start off the sketch of your drawing, they have circles. So when you're doing your hand, it does have a shape. It has a particular shape to it. It's like a square. Some people do it in a square, but some people may do it in a triangle. That's where your shapes come in, and that's why I said learn your shapes. Your shapes are definitely your basics for you to be able to absolutely learn, for you to be able to actually get your setup for what you're trying to go for. As the same way as if you're drawing buildings, and that's something else I'm actually going to get into next for the subject about that. But that's when you're getting into buildings. You got some buildings that are rectangle. You got some buildings that are square shaped, like a pyramid. A pyramid is actually square shaped, even though it's not like buildings that you see here in North America, or buildings that you would see in any other parts of the world. But you also have some buildings that have like like the Pentagon. Like the Pentagon is definitely a shape. And you have the octagon of the UFC match that is just basically the octagon. So shapes really do come into play when you start off with the basics, and that's when you go into proportions to absolutely get it to fit to meet the perspective of the viewer. And like I said, with those two, you can play with them as much as possible. You can absolutely try to get it to where it can be kind of funky looking, or you can just get it to be very weird and chaotic, so long as it's really within that region of you just getting proportions down. Now, when I was talking about buildings earlier, this is something that I didn't even really know about until I was absolutely taking art in college. Perspective comes in mind. You see perspective when you're looking at photos of a street. Now, perspective is pretty much the same as foreshortening, and foreshortening is pretty much what you see in comics. Okay, so this is a little bit hard for me to explain, considering that this you have no visual at the moment, but I may actually make a video of that for my YouTube channel to teach people foreshortening. Foreshortening is basically as if you're seeing a character throwing a straight punch at you. So when you're really looking at that punch that character is throwing like straight forward, you see that the fist that is coming right at your face, it's not going to be super huge or anything, but it's going to have a particular size to it to match up with the rest of that arm that's supposed to be going off at a far distance. Okay, so if you're seeing that arm coming towards you, you're gonna see the fist, which is gonna be much more up close. But as you're getting further along to looking at that arm, the shoulder part starts to get a bit smaller, but it's not going to be bigger than that hand. So if I put my hand next to my shoulder, yeah, it would be the same size. But when you're putting it against somebody's face or in a window, and they're still standing from it, it will still have a particular size to it to actually match up with every other part of your arm that's going up to your body. But that is also perspective. So perspective, especially when you're absolutely looking at buildings, you're also looking at people that are going to be standing in between distance from one another. So you have people that are standing at maybe a street light, and then maybe like 5 steps over or maybe 10 steps over, there's like a mailbox that has another person standing right by it. Perspective really does come into play along with shapes and proportions. They all really do come into play. There are many more basics to art that goes along with that, but there's also some advanced techniques of what you can learn as well. But really just learn the basics first before you try to go advanced. And trying to go advanced too quickly is really not a good thing to try to do right now. Yeah, I get that you want to try to be good as fast as possible, but I'm here to tell you right now that when you're doing art, it takes practice and it takes patience. And that's going to be the very last thing I'm actually going to talk about at the end of this video. But other techniques that you can learn while breaking into the art industry, you can learn values, you can learn shadowing, lighting. You can also learn hues. I think hues somewhat kind of falls in the same place as values in a way. Volume, color theory. So, speaking of color theory, you do have colors that will be neutral, and you have colors that are your primary colors, and then you have your secondary colors. Your neutral colors are pretty much black and white. Those are your neutral colors. I would definitely tell you that we have a lot of artists out there that make their when they're making their art, some of them really do choose to work with their neutral colors more than they would like to work with their primary colors. And I'm not going to go into a full-blown discussion about that until maybe like another podcast, because right now I really didn't I really didn't prepare notes for color theory or anything like that. But I definitely say that you do have a lot more artists out there that will much rather work with their natural colors than they would with their neutral colors than they would with their primary colors. I'm definitely one of those. I've been doing that a lot in I've actually been doing that quite a good bit in Autodesk Sketchbook. I'm still learning other tools in there, but I'm also making my own brushes and a few other things. But that's something that really does play a part in learning basics also. Yes, the basics also is definitely learning your colors and your neutral colors, your primary colors, and your secondary colors. But go with more the neutral and the primary colors first before you move over to your secondary colors. Alright. One thing I definitely have been doing a lot of recently is that I have been getting a lot of art books from other artists. And I get books from artists that I really admire, but also books on learning how to draw certain things. But there are like concept art books. I have a book from Creature Box, whom is a fantastic artist. I definitely highly recommend that you guys check out Creature Box. I have books from Anthony Scott Coffey and Jesse LeBay from Certifiable Studios. Even though I am good friends with them, but I really do admire their artwork, and these guys have actually done successful Kickstarters. They have done Who Goes There, that is based on the book Who Goes There, but also based on the film The Thing from the 1980s with Kurt Russell. They have also done, oh, what's the name of that? Endangered Orphans. I had to actually look over to my shelf and see what the name of that board game was they worked on. That was one of their first Kickstarters, and that was Endangered Orphans. But they've also done another board game called Stuffed. Incredible guys, incredible artists, and like I said, definitely check out Certifiable Studios and Creature Box. But I have also gotten an art book from a guy that I really admire on YouTube. His name is Trent Canoga, and whenever he releases a new video every Wednesday on YouTube, I'm glued to it. I listen to everything of what he has to say. This guy used to work with Blizzard. He actually has his own company now called Aquatic Moon, but he worked on Diablo 3. He also had done comics, and just sitting here listening to this guy about every word of what he was saying about being in the art industry, he's so dead on, and I definitely really admire what he talks about. The guy is definitely a voice that I feel like that a lot of artists should really listen to, because he's not an old timer or anything like that. It's just the fact that he has years of experience underneath his belt to absolutely talk about that, and everything of what he talked about in his videos is the same exact journey of what I went through when breaking into the art industry. And for those of you that don't know, yes, I have been published in comics. I have also done conventions. I have been published in newspapers and magazines, and it's really tough, as I was saying at the beginning of this podcast, about breaking into the art industry. But I'm getting a little bit off track there, so I'll talk more about that in another video. I really should have had more notes about what I was going to absolutely talk about in this podcast. But anyway, and like I was saying, gather books on concepts. Two types of books that I would definitely, or should I say one type of book that you definitely want to try to get your hand on the most, and you could possibly get like multiple versions of this, because each book really do have their own versions on how to do this. Get a book that is dealing with anatomy and structure. That right there definitely goes back to what I was talking about with shapes, perspective, and proportions. Anatomy and structure. When you're looking at comics, you're seeing how so well detailed, and I'm talking about ones from like Marvel and DC and Image. It's one thing when you're seeing indie comics, or should I say comics from just anybody that have like humans, or just basically any kind of creature. They have an anatomy that they follow by. Animals have a really unique anatomy to them, because you have some that are on all fours, or you have some that are on two legs like us, but they don't necessarily have the same shape as us. You can also go to websites to learn anatomy, or you can just find a picture on anatomy for you can just find a basic picture about anatomy to really think about how the human body is absolutely formed, or when you want to just create something that is out of the ordinary. I tend to do that a lot. I get a lot of I get some books that are dealing with anatomy and structure, but I'm also starting to get more books that are dealing with even robot anatomy or how to draw vehicles. Those are also falling in the line of like vehicle anatomy or vehicle structure or robotic anatomy and structure. Creatures, as I was saying, have their own unique anatomy. Like, the thing about anatomy is that you don't necessarily have to have that perfect anatomy. What's the main point of anatomy, because every artist have their own art style and they have their own unique way of doing something. The main point of you to learn anatomy is to build everything from the ground up of what you've read and learned from it. And I mean, definitely read the side notes of how anatomy works. But after you get all of that stuff from the anatomy, with the whole basics and the structure and all, the whole point of it is for you to break it down in your own way and rebuild it again. Anatomy is definitely highly important. Every artist out there that have done many things for many others, have also had their work critiqued by others, will tell you to definitely learn anatomy. It's definitely it's definitely one of the more critical things that, especially if you're going to get into like a gaming industry, or if you're going to work for a comic book company and you really want to show your work, you definitely got to have anatomy there. But they definitely want to see your style. They want to see your style of what you're working with. They want to see your style of what makes your artwork pop in a way to catch the eye. As one person that I was listening to would say, if you're going to work for another company, you're going to have to draw exactly what that company is looking for. You're going to have to cater to that company exactly what they're looking for. And it's not a tough thing to do. No, it's not super fun or anything. But if that's something that you have been wanting to get into for a long time, then I would suggest, yes, definitely try to draw something that they're going to be looking for. Not something that is already created. But that all of this really goes back into breaking into the art industry. I would definitely tell you, for me to be drawing since the age of 5, I'll be 36 next month. For me to be drawing from the age of 5 all the way to now, that has definitely been a journey to sit there and really think about when it comes to absolutely bringing into the art industry. You're sitting there trying to learn shapes, you're trying to learn perspective, you're learning proportions. But then after you get those basics in there, then you start learning anatomy and structure, and then you go to everything else. I can't stress enough to tell you guys exactly how tough it is to get out there and absolutely get your artwork off the ground, to really just to get some kind of recognition, or to try to absolutely get hired for something. I have met many great artists out there that are just they're killing it right now, and then I see some of them going out to getting shows or putting on their own show. People out there doing exactly what I'm doing. Like, they have their own YouTube channel now. They're doing conventions, and that's definitely been something that I really enjoy doing. So, as I was saying, definitely do those things there. Learn your shapes, learn your proportions, learn your perspective. I know I'm gonna keep repeating this until it actually. I'm gonna keep repeating this until it actually, gets into somebody's head to where it's like, okay, this guy absolutely said this, and I really need to take heed of what he's absolutely saying. But yes, shapes, proportions, perspective, anatomy, and structure. Those are your basics that you really need to learn. Other than just your neutral colors and your primary colors, definitely learn those. All right, so the last thing that I definitely want to hit up on before I end this podcast is practice as often as possible. The more you practice, the better you get. The more you practice, the more you absolutely come into your own style, or should I say your own pop of what makes your artwork unique in its own way. The more you practice, the more you're going to absolutely see details. The more details you'll add. Practice is definitely essential. I work a day job. Sometimes I'm there from morning until nightfall. Sometimes I would get maybe like a 2-hour break or maybe a 30-minute break. I would bring my sketchbook with me as often as possible to my day jobs. And sometimes I don't even get a chance to absolutely draw because I end up getting so busy with everything that goes on at that day job when I'm having to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning until possibly 10 o'clock at night. I take my sketchbook with me as often as possible to really get some kind of practice in. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to come up to you and they're going to say, how did you get so good at this? How did you get so good at that? And it all goes back to you constantly practicing as much as possible. Definitely do that. You could even take maybe like a quick 5 minutes and just draw like the basics. Like you could work on circles or squares, and I sometimes catch myself doing that when I'm having to have like a long day at work. I sometimes just work on my basics. I would draw faces, or I would draw arms. I would work on creatures. I would work on buildings. Definitely practice as much as possible. And I think I'm gonna say some extra things on this. Not the whole, practice as often as possible, but more ways of breaking into the art industry. So even if I did say work on those basics and gather books on concepts or anatomy and structure, so conventions is another way you can actually get into the art industry, and that really set the motivation for me to get in there. And I'm not going to talk about this one very long, but more of why I say conventions are definitely important. Conventions, you meet other people for inspiration. I have met K. Michael Russell, Roland Paris, Stephen Butler, and other people that work in the comic book industry, but I also have met other people that have been getting their artwork out there and talked to them, and I have gotten advice from them about what I could possibly do to absolutely get into the art industry. These guys said the exact same thing, but they also told me another thing is to not quit my day job, because trying to make money from your art is definitely not an easy one. It's definitely pretty tough to be able to make enough money from it, unless you're like one of those really well-known artists that really has like a Patreon, or you're able to make like boogles amount of money from your art, which is really good, but it takes a lot of work just to really get there. The more known you are, then you can raise your price up a little bit here and there, and as I was saying, is that conventions definitely do help. It really did help me get on track to where I'm now doing comics, and I have T-shirts and bookmarks and a few other things to absolutely get out there to the public. And it's like you building your own brand, or you helping somebody building a brand. Definitely take as much advice as possible from them, and just really take notes. Take everything of what they're saying to you. Just take it all in and apply it later. Um, it's really, like I was saying earlier. It's a journey. But anyway, I hope that this was a very good podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I actually ran 30 minutes on this. This is actually very good for my first podcast. Usually when I'm doing live streams, my live streams are like 1 hour long on Facebook, but sometimes I may extend it a little bit longer. But thank you guys so much for tuning into my very first podcast. I really appreciate you guys so much for all that you do. Uh, you guys are definitely a blessing that I have been needing, because you guys have been so supportive of everything that I have been doing. And without you guys, I wouldn't be where I am right now doing everything. So I love you guys. Thank you all so much. You guys definitely continue being safe out there. I know that the world is super crazy at the moment with everything that is going on. Try to remain as peaceful as possible with one another. Continuously being as healthy as possible for one another, and spread as much love as possible, and just be safe. You guys take care, and I'm gonna end on a note by saying, imagine the possibilities and embrace them. Love you all.